Okay, so we're on a new topic now, looking at attachment. So we've looked at research methods, we've looked at social influence, memory, and all our approaches. So now, attachment, psychopathology, and potentially issues and debates at the end. That's our final bit of year 12, before we move on to schizophrenia, gender, forensics, and biopsychology, and then we are finished. So, look at an introduction to attachment. So we need to look at a few key words in this. Caregiver-infant interactions and interactional synchrony, along with the idea of reciprocity. So we're seeing how is it that caregiver-infant interactions exist, how do they manifest, and how are they maintained? So when we look at attachment, how would we describe it? In theory, it's a close two-way bond between individuals, and it's essentially for their own emotional security. So attachment takes a few months to development, but it's crucial to, as you move on in life, to having those good bonds with people, maintaining relationships. So a lot of psychologists argue that we need to have this bond early on in life so that we can progress to be well-rounded, healthy adults when we're older. So in terms of why you think they might be essential, you can have discussion amongst yourself. Why are they essential? Well, basically for those things, to make sure that we can create bonds when we're older, to manifest relationships, and a lot of researchers argue that we need at least one primary caregiver attachment in the first 6 months of life in order for us to progress as healthy individuals. So that's the definition of attachment. However, other alternative definitions, people have a variety of different ways of describing what attachment actually is. So this definition, a formation of strong reciprocal emotional bond between an infant and a caregiver, which sees them develop their own emotional security. So that primary caregiver I've already kind of mentioned is that one person who they have that bond with. A lot of researchers, when we look at John Bowlby, argues that it is the mother. The mother has to be present for the first 6 months to 2 years of life in order for them to develop this emotional security and have those strong bonds with people. And people have obviously gone against that. It's gender biased. It's not fair to say it's just the mum. What about the father? And we'll look at all of that as we go on to progress. Emotional security, why is it important? Well, you've got to have a framework. So why, if you see your caregiver acting in a way that they deem acceptable, you then take that on board. So it's a bit of a social learning thing. You learn your emotional security through your caregivers. So if you don't have that strong caregiver, how do you then develop your own emotional security? You can do your own discussion. How do you know if a mother and their infant have good interactions? What might it look like? So it's going to be things like eye contact. It's going to be things like the child looking to the parent, the mother or the father, to respond to their needs, their cues. So it is that two-way street, which we'll look at in a minute. So non-verbal communication is one of the key interactions here. So communicating without any words, without any sound. Also, if you think I'm going too fast, pause it so you can make some notes. So it is those non-verbal cues. They base our attachment, they create it. So we'll look at a few videos. Meltzoff and Moore has a really good bit of research. Actually, I'll pause it so you can type it in and have a look. Where the mother is told not to respond to any of the cues of the child. Just sit there emotionless and see what happens. How does the child respond to that? And they try and get their attention. They cry, they really make up a fuss, because those non-verbal communication styles, the eye contact, the smiling, really helps to develop that bond between mother and infant or father and infant. So having those signals and being sensitive to them helps develop that deeper relationship. Okay, so it's being sensitive to their cues. So reciprocity is quite an interesting key term that we need here for AO1. And it's basically just responding to the action with another action or something similar. So in the 1970s, lots of research were looking at the fact that caregivers and their infants, they would respond and coordinate their responses to each other, like a non-verbal conversation. There's a brilliant one that I saw on Facebook of a father and his little girl, and they're not actually talking, they're sort of looking at each other and nodding, but that's the idea of reciprocity, that it's like a two-way conversation without the speech. So it's like a rhythm. They learn to take it in turns from the adult. We've got some key researchers here, Brazetlo, looking at this basic rhythm. It's a precursor for later communications. So if they learn this non-verbal style, then when they're older and they're having those social interactions with peers, they're better because they've had this reciprocity as an infant. And it comes down to the quality and the quantity. So having those regular non-verbal communication with the child, they're anticipating it, and they lay the foundations for individuals to develop their attachment more healthily. So interactional synchrony is a little bit different, and it is still kind of turn-taking, but it's how infants move in tune with the rhythm of spoken language. So then this turn-taking takes place, but it's more of a vocal conversation. So whereas reciprocity is non-verbal, interactional synchrony is about that sort of verbal two-way communication. So it's like they tend to mirror their facial expressions, and that's this research, Meltzoff and Moore. Put it into YouTube and have a look, it's so fascinating. So it's the association that it's expression of the gesture of the adult. The babies then mimicked it. They displayed it as well. Observational research, we have to be careful, what are we actually taking away here? And is it not just how a baby would generally be, or is it that we are seeing interactional synchrony? Okay, so that's partly really fascinating. So have a look, make some notes on it, and do some evaluation. Yes, that's what I wanted you to do. So make some notes on Meltzoff and Moore, the aim, the procedure, the findings, what conclusions can we make. It's a key bit of research for this area that you need to know, so do that. Then, we've got some new keywords that we need for this area. Now, part of it we've seen already from research methods, but part of it we'll need, or you'll see more of, when we come to the year 13 side of research methods at the start of year 13, if we get there. So the idea of individual differences, we've looked at this already, but we're looking at loads of different individuals in research. How is that going to impact on the findings? Reliability. If we repeat it again, which Meltzoff and Moore, for example, has been, and saw similar findings, that's better. That makes the idea more reliable, more consistent. Practical applications. What can we do with it? Can we apply it outside to the different outside world, to different countries? That's linking into this cross-cultural variation. If we took this idea, this phenomenon, into different areas of the world, are we going to see the same thing? Is it universal? Something like emotion, for example, that is universal. Value, can we use it? Can we provide, does it help the economy? Is it useful elsewhere? And then pseudo, are we getting fake results as opposed to real ones? How would we go about working that out? Okay, so these keywords and ideas are quite critical to this part of the course. I would have done some group work, but we're not going to be able to do that. Probably all that, to be fair.